Okay, it's official. This is the start of podcast number 2, episode 2 of Carpe Diem Connections. And I'm here with my first guest. I'm very excited. Tom Johnston is my very first guest on my podcast. And I was drawn to him. We're new. We've just met. So we don't really know each other in real life yet. We only know each other virtually because he started a meetup that had a lot of energy to it. So I kind of associate him with energy. And so Tom, take it away. Tell us about who you are.
Who I am. Well,
Who
thank
are
you.
you?
Yeah, well, I think I'm still trying to figure that out, right? But yeah, so number one is thank you for asking me to be the guest today. And I would say that my background is really in fitness, right? And so I've arrived at this place through a journey which includes growing up in the fitness industry, running health clubs. I've been involved in starting up a university in Saudi Arabia, and I've done some work in positive psychology, and I'm an energy leadership coach. And right now I'm searching for what I'm going to do next, right? Professionally. But above all of that, who I am is I'm a dad, and being a father to me comes number one, and above everything else is I'm a dad and a friend. So
Yeah.
that's what's really important to me.
Cool. Well, it's good to sort of know your priorities, and it sounds like you have your priorities in order, and so tell us, your energy leadership coach, is that right?
That's true.
What does that mean?
What it means is really I've got to coaching. I arrived at becoming a coach was one of the things I always wanted to do. And I got to a particular certification, which is through IPAC, I had taken a course in positive psychology, and was with some wonderful people. And towards the end of the program, somebody said, you really should take the coaching certification. And they recommended this particular certification, and they had researched it. When I found out what it was about, I was all in, because what it really helps people to do is we start with a basic, I'll call it an assessment, really, which helps people to understand 7 levels of energy. And we coach to those energy levels so that people understand where they are in their level of consciousness, and how stress impacts them. And within the 7 levels of energy, there's the first 2 levels of energy are really about being in catabolic energy, which is really negative energy. And then you go up the scale of all the way to level 7 energy, which is really, think about, who that might be. It would be the Dalai Lama, right? And when working with a client, we start out with this basic index, and they get to understand how they show up in life when they're not under stress, and then what happens when they are in stress. And then from a coaching perspective, we coach around where, maybe where they're dropping into, I'll call it the lowest levels of energy, which would be levels 1 and 2. And the way that I like to describe this is, when you think about these levels of energy, is imagine that you're in an elevator, and you're in a parking garage, and at the very, very bottom of the parking garage, and you're in this kind of cold, dank area, and that's sort of that level 1 energy. And then the elevator starts going up, and it's a glass elevator, and the higher that you go up, you start to see the world differently as you rise to the top. And that's really what happens with the energy levels, is as you start to rise up, you start to see the world differently. And level 1 you're more of a victim, and then as you rise up, you get to a point where you start to see things as win-win and opportunities. And so it really helps from a leadership perspective, for a leader to understand how they are impacting an organization, how they're impacting the folks around them. And at the end of the day, everybody's a leader. We all have, we're leading our lives. It's how we approach our lives. It's how we approach our family. our career and life.
Mhm. So are those energy levels, you said, are mind driven? You know, our attitude can help us from becoming a victim to someone who is um, engaging and spreading positive energy. But what about, does it also include things like what you're eating and how you're sleeping and your environment and things like that? Does
Yeah, I mean, that'll
get into that kind of?
it does. From my perspective, I do touch on that because, you know, my background in positive psychology starts to influence that. My background in fitness starts to influence where I might be working with a client.
Mhm.
And you know, inevitably, you know, your energy, certainly when you talk about exercise, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be a fit top athlete, but anybody that is exercising on a regular basis, that will increase your energy. You know, you're releasing endorphins, all the good stuff. And then certainly from a, you know, I'll call it from a holistic perspective, when you think about fitness, I always say that there's, you know, there's no such thing as bad fitness, but certainly there's bad diet and there's bad nutrition. And when you're approaching it, you know, I look at it as about 25% of like fitness is actually exercise, and about 75% is diet. And we certainly as Americans don't have the best diets. You know, the standard American diet is SAD. It's sad at times. So oftentimes that will certainly influence how someone's feeling, what they're putting in their body is going to fuel their energy. And let's face it, the more stress that we have in our lives, the more difficult it becomes to, you know, we overeat, we drink,
Yeah.
we do all those things that go along with being stressed.
Yeah, it's
So
really a
it
downward
is a
cycle.
whole, oh yeah, yeah. And so, you know, and that's a great point, right? So the downward cycle and the energy is, you know, what we try to do is work on the upward cycle.
Right, because yeah, it's the
And
opposite once you start having positive things in your life. And another thing, besides the attitude and all these environmental kinds of things, it's also, there's this contagious factor as well. When you're around people that have positive energy, that overflows onto you, and the same thing when it's negative energy. And so in your coaching or in that course, is that talked about as well as this
sure,
factor of?
sure. And yeah, and you know, when you think about it, if I'm coaching in an organization, right, what I really begin to coach on is the culture of the organization and how people are behaving. And the reality is that, you know, 85% of people are not engaged in their work. And, you know, statistics pre-COVID were, you know, 50% of the people would quit their job today if they could. And you know, oftentimes that's because of the culture of the organization, the way that people are behaving, toxic organizations. I mean, we all hear about that. That ends up causing stress on people, right? And they become potentially apathetic about the job, and they just kind of check out. So coaching in an organization and having an organization begin to build a culture based on a language around energy is super important as well. So once you start to have that dialogue with leadership, they can then recognize, you know, what their behaviors are and how that behavior is impacting other people. So a big part of this is just, you know, it's creating that awareness,
Yeah,
and understanding that, you know, a lot of this is also ego driven.
right.
Right. So
Yeah.
it's really, and it's really interesting work to see, you know, folks change.
Mhm.
Ultimately, that's what this is about. And you know, being able to have a change where once you learn this, you know, it's also easy for people to then understand what their triggers are, what then potentially triggers them into a negative or that downward spiral.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you want to take your coaching, whatever your next chapter is, it's going to include coaching. And
Yeah.
why don't you tell us about these current efforts? I met you through a meetup that you just started, and I know you started a Facebook group. Tell our audience about
Yeah,
that.
sure. Well, thanks. So, yeah, so you mentioned next chapter. So I also shared with you, you know, I've been in the fitness industry all these years, and back on July 1st, I was furloughed from my position as I was vice president of North American distributor global vertical sales for a fitness equipment manufacturer, and was furloughed. And certainly living here in Colorado, I was like, hey, this is not a bad thing. I'm furloughed, and in the month of July in Colorado, it was great. And about 2 or 3 weeks after riding my bicycle, hiking, and climbing 14ers, backpacking, all that kind of stuff, I was like, all right, what's next? And one of the things that I'm really interested in is certainly helping people through, whether it be through coaching or however it may be. And so I started this group called the Ageless Explorers, and for people who are 50 and older, to really help them to understand and bring people together so that we can work together to find our why, find our purpose. And I was shocked that when I put this group up on Meetup, I thought, wow, if I get 8 people, I'm going to be psyched. And all of a sudden I had 20 people and then 30 people, and I think it's 150 plus right now. And the way that I started it really last week was by having an initial call to just, get a sense of what people were thinking and what they're feeling. And it was really amazing to understand how people are feeling about COVID, how they are, in situations where they're in life transition, and they've maybe had a job in the corporate world, and like I was just saying, they're maybe like done with that whole thing because of the what goes on in corporate world, and they're trying to figure out what's next. And and then you weren't able to attend the meeting, so then we had a conversation, and like here we are, and I've got you're going to be joining us tomorrow night, and on a call, and sharing your experience as an agile coach, which is awesome. And through this first meeting in this group, I've already met like some wonderful people, and have started a Facebook group, and it's really about starting a conversation for people, and ultimately building a community is what it's about, because we all miss, that was certainly one of the themes, is that we miss community. We miss connecting with people through COVID. And being new here in Colorado, the last year and a half, when I moved here, I've been traveling, 3 times a month. I was on planes, and then working when and I was just exhausted. So I didn't get to meet anybody in Denver. Started the group, and now I'm meeting all kinds of cool people, and figuring out what's going to be next.
Yeah, it's interesting how life works that way. And I know I felt the same way of like, oh, this COVID hit, and this is the perfect time when I want to be meeting people. And then when I thought about doing this podcast, I'm like, this is the perfect opportunity for me to meet, people. They don't have to be people that live by me. They can be, there's so many people and thought leaders that I read their blog posts or listen to their podcasts or see them on social media, and I just am kind of noting, oh, that's really interesting. Now I'm like, okay, I'm going to contact that person, see if I can get an interview with them. So,
Exactly.
It's fun and a great opportunity to network beyond our, and it also, I think, is a little easier if you just meet somebody on the street. It's hard to say, hey, let's talk, but if you have a meetup or a podcast or, some kind of community that you're building, and our boundaries are not anymore just those physical location boundaries. We have the whole world we can invite to join us. That's, I think, really cool. So
so I've done, I've been doing a pretty deep dive and really trying to understand what ageism looks like in today's day and age, and because I've had this time, I like you, it sounds like I've been on webinars and really just trying to hear what thought leaders are talking about. I was on a call the other day with this gentleman, and he was one of a panel, and reached out to him. He's in Amsterdam, and asked him if he would chat, and we had a great conversation, and he's going to be a guest on one of my
awesome.
one of my upcoming Zoom meetings. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So I think, one of the lessons learned is that, there's a lot of people out there that just want to help.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as long as you are, you know, I believe if you are just want to be part of that conversation, then people are open to talking to you. And, you know, for me, you know, part of Ageless Explorers, and why I've started this is because I'm living on my why. I understand what my why is, and with that, you know, the group, if you will, is just manifested as a result of me living on my why.
And so what your why, and your why being, what is your
my purpose, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
your purpose.
So
being...
you know, I had a fellow coach, and a couple of years ago we went through Simon Sinek's book and his workbook, and I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek, and you know, he's the why guy,
yeah,
right? And
ask why. Yep. Start with the why.
Right.
Yeah.
Start with the why, right? And so we went through that exercise, and you know, I came up with my why, which was to help, you know, is to help others understand the power of resilience, so that we can live a happy and lasting family life. And you know, where I've altered it now is to help, and I'm going to call it modern elders, right, who are the 50 plus people, understand the power of resilience, and then, you know, they can fill in what's their, you know, why, if you will, but you know, it's so that we can live a happy and lasting family life. And I'm living on my why, and that's what brought me to Denver. I moved from Brooklyn to Denver to be closer to my son, and I'm living out that purpose every single day, and and it feels amazing.
That's awesome. All right, so last question here. I'm, you know, since this is a new podcast, I'm trying to figure out my format, but I think we're going to end with the question of, what does a meaningful life mean to you? You sort of just answered that a little bit. But you know, I don't know if you want to add any more to, if you had a year to live, how would you spend it? You know,
you know, it's a great question. And, you know, I probably would be doing a lot of what I'm doing right now. And, you know, and spending time with other family members and friends, and having experiences with those people that, you know, we would be creating memories together. And, you know, it's something I learned at a young age, is that, you know, death, we never know when that's going to happen. So we live life to the fullest is what it's all about. And for me, at the end of the day, it's about people.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you very much, Tom. Great first interview. Yay. And with that, we will sign off. Episode number 2. Tom Johnston.